Keep fingers and fingernails out of the way when slicing bread. Welcome back to the Sourdough Trials. This week I take a yeast recipe from Artisan Bread in 5 minutes a day, and try to turn it into a sourdough recipe. Let's get started. I fed my starter on the previous evening, and in the morning get my dough started. I'm going to use 100 grams of starter for this recipe. My starter is made with about a 1-to-1 ratio water to flour. The 100 grams of starter that I'm measuring out is about 50 grams of water and 50 grams of flour. The original recipe calls for 1.5 cups of water, 3/4 tablespoon of kosher salt, 3/4 cup of cornmeal, and 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I measured out 2.5 cups of flour, but I'm going to remove 50 grams because I'm adding the starter. Remember, the starter is the equivalent of 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. Here I have 1.5 cups of water, but I'm also going to remove 50 grams from there. The original recipe called for 1 packet of instant yeast, but I omit that because I'm using my sourdough starter instead. I mix together the dry ingredients, mix the starter into the water to loosen it up, oops, too wide. Back to the spatula. Next, I add the wet ingredients to the dry ingredients. The original recipe says to cover and let rise for about 2 hours, but because I'm using starter and that can sometimes take a little longer, I left it for about 3 hours. I'm still not sure if that's quite long enough though. After the dough has rested, remove it from the bowl and form into 2 balls. Place onto cornmeal covered pizza peel. Flatten slightly and rest for at least 40 minutes. "20 minutes before baking, preheat the oven and a pizza stone to 450. Sprinkle with cornmeal and score your dough. Right before baking, pour 1 cup of hot water into a broiler pan or baking dish to create steam. Overall, these turned out pretty well. They maybe could have used a longer proof time.
Sessions as well. And the phrase that I use is getting to the right solution the wrong way. And there is something.
Let's see how the crumb looks. Well, the crumb looks a bit tight. It's not gummy and it springs back. I would guess that the cornmeal has something to do with how this turned out. It's hearty, chewy, and delicious, both with the fish stew that I made and with breakfast the next day.